Okay, welcome to the Lehigh County Authority Board of Directors meeting of September 12, 2022. This meeting is being held in a hybrid fashion with some board members present in the boardroom and others available on Zoom and also maybe telephone. Let's begin the meeting with a roll call of the Board of Directors.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Roll call of the board: Brian Noggle.
Here.
Scott Bieber.
Here.
Dick Bonner.
Here.
Norma Cusick. Norma?
She's on, but her audio does not seem to be working, Lisa.
Okay. Ted Lyons. Here. Linda Rosenfeld.
Here.
Jeff Morgan.
Here.
Amir Famili.
Here.
All right.
We want to try
let's see if we can hear from Norma.
She's muted right now.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll move on. All
Yes.
right. The board packet was distributed to the board in advance electronically, hard copy, and is also available online for anybody to review. Let's see. Okay, let's review the agenda and any need for executive sessions.
All right. So for today, I have no specific changes to the agenda, but there is an executive session requested following the close of the regular meeting to discuss potential real estate acquisition as well as legal matters with our solicitor.
Okay, thank you. Any comments, questions? All right, so we will have a executive session after the board meeting. The information for that meeting for participating via Zoom was a separate communication. You should have that information if you're not present in the meeting. Okay, approval of the minutes from August 22nd, 2022.
I make a motion we accept the minutes for August 22nd as published.
Second.
All right, motion by Dick and second by Linda. Any questions? All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you very much. This time we open up the floor to the public for any comments or questions on non-agenda items. Does anybody have anything to offer?
I have no comments, Brian. Thank you.
Okay, moving on to action discussion items. We have two items under finance and administration. First of all is the LCA Munis ERP system planning and re-implementation program. It's the gray documents in the board package, also digitally pages 7 through 18.
All right. Thank you, everyone. I apologize for my remote attendance today. I am at a Pennsylvania Municipal Authorities Association meeting out of the area, but appreciate the opportunity to meet with you all virtually. So for this topic, this is a continuation of discussion we've been having about our financial software. It's called Munis, and the need for us to really just take a harder look at how we're using the system and re-implementing the system in order to better utilize the capability and functionality. Before I get into some of the details of the memo and the authorization that's been requested, I wanted to introduce Brooke Neevy, who I believe is in the room. I think I see Brooke's head. Hi, Brooke. Brooke Neevy is our Director of Customer Service here at Lehigh County Authority. So she oversees our billing and collections, customer service, metering, a variety of other functions, and is a relatively new member of the team, but brings vast experience in both finance for municipal organizations and customer care. as well as, believe it or not, Munis experience from her prior role for another municipality. So she's been a great addition to the team, and I introduced her specifically because moving forward, you may be hearing more from her, as she will be our internal project manager for this particular effort. And then in addition to Brooke, we have some other core team members who will be assisting Brooke in addition to myself, Chris Mullen, and Ed Klein. We also have Todd Marion on the call, who is our controller. He'll be a key player in this project, as well as Pete Burkhart, who is our IT manager, who will be supporting on the technical side of this project. Really important, broad project. So want to make sure we have a solid team focused on this effort. So for today, what we're talking about is really just a continuation of discussion we've had over the last several months regarding the Munis system and our overarching goal for process improvement, focusing on our financial processes, our reporting, our administrative work, and all of it seems to be tied together with our Munis product, our Munis system, how we're using it, and how it was implemented back in 2007 and 2008. As we talked about previously, I believe it was last month, the folks from Raftellus were on the call with us to review their work doing the needs assessment. We really have discovered that the Munis system and how it was configured or implemented 15 years ago or so really is not meeting our needs today. The organization has changed dramatically over that time period. And for us to achieve the level of integration, reporting, and accountability that we want to achieve, we think the Munis system can do it, but we need to sort of break down and start from square one and re-implement it using best business practices, which is what this project is really about. So through the needs assessment that was done and finished last month, Raftellus walked us through a variety of workshops and discussions about Munis, and understanding that we believe Munis still to be the right system for us. And that's actually a really good thing. There's a lot of benefits to focusing on re-implementing Munis rather than starting from scratch with a whole new system. And we're excited about that opportunity. Just to give you a flavor of a couple things that Munis offers, there are modules that LCA has access to within Munis to do things like capital project accounting or human resources management, and several other things like customer self-service or employee self-service. Those are all functions and modules within Munis that we're not using today, and we really can't necessarily use today to their full benefit without this project to re-implement and start start from the baseline up and build the foundation using best business practices. So again, we think that Munis is the right system for us if we want to utilize all the resources that it offers. Another benefit I'd like to highlight is the fact that our employees are already using Munis. So the learning curve will be much less steep. They're already comfortable with the tool. It's just a matter of maybe learning how to use it more effectively once it's been implemented with some new structure in place for our accounting system. So this project that's in front of you is really the kickoff of that work. The prior work was more of the exploration and determining what the project should look like. Now we have the project a little bit better defined, and we want to kick it off with bringing Raftellus back on board to support the project. And they provided a pretty comprehensive proposal, which is attached to the board packet. The proposal really takes us through the entire life cycle of this project. So getting us started with facilitating the planning work, realigning current business practices, going through that internal discussion and guiding us and facilitating us through that internal discussion about our business practices, documenting that, and then moving on to negotiating an updated contract with Tyler Technologies, which is the parent company that provides the Munis software, and then walking us through as a third-party support system for the implementation project. And also beyond that, once we hit the magic date and are ready to re-implement the go live date of the new software, Raftellus will stick with us through a post go live period to make sure we're receiving the support that we need on the new system. So we believe Raftellus has done a good job with the needs assessment. They understand our business practices well enough to know what we need to work on and what's possible. They also have, their team has familiarity with Munis, have done projects with Munis before, and they're also proposing a comprehensive change management approach, which I think is going to be really beneficial for the organization because those of you who are on the core team know everybody touches Munis in some way, whether it's through direct work on the accounting side or the billing side, but also through the whole organization with our payroll system, our purchasing system, etc. So having effective change management is going to be really important as well to help all employees kind of get up to speed with the new processes and help us through that. So that's what we're focused on today, is getting Raftellus on board to get us started with this project. And for that, we have their proposal as well as a capital project authorization to get us started, as well as their professional services authorization for Raftellus. And then once we move forward and get some of that initial planning work done and negotiate that contract with Tyler Technologies, we'll be back for an amendment to the capital project authorization for the Tyler contract approval as well. So at this point, maybe I'll pause and ask Brooke if you have any comments you'd like to make, or how any, anything you'd like to add to what's here today.
Sure. I just wanted to say how excited I am about this project, and we're hoping that today we get your support to move forward. I think this, as Liesl said, will touch everyone through LCA, throughout the entire company, hopefully making some great improvements, some process and procedural improvements, and just everyday life improvements for everybody who uses the system. I'm very excited. I do have history with Munis. I also have history on both the accounting and customer care side, so I think this is going to be a great project for us to move forward with. And we have a fantastic team here at LCA who seems to be just as excited as I, so we're really looking forward to moving on and getting started. It's nice to meet you all.
Thank you, Brooke, and welcome to the organization.
Thank you.
It's an extremely important project to make sure it comes about. All right, any comments, questions? Do we have a proposal before us? Anything?
Yeah, I have a comment. Looking at the estimated fees, which are on page, I'm glad to see that this is a not to exceed proposal. That is to say, I'm assuming that it's a process set up where invoices will be sent in on a periodic basis and reviewed and by LCA, and approved and payment will be made. But I just like this approach to this type of project, that we're doing it not to exceed. Thank you.
And we have the rate schedule in here for the different individuals that are participating. Is there any escalator on those charges over the years? Because it's about a 2-year project, year and a half project. No escalator. So
the proposal is for the entire project. So the rates that are shown here are the rates that we would pay for the whole project.
Okay, thank you.
Just a couple of
Amir?
questions. Who is the LCA lead for this project?
Brooke will be. Lisa, myself, and Ed are kind of the steering committee, and we'll work closely with Brooke and the implementation team from Raftellus and Tyler Tech once on board, and Brooke will be the tip of the spear, so to speak.
Okay. And Raftellus has done implementation of this kind of project before in
Yes.
other.
Specifically Munis multiple times. So, I mean, to their benefit, to our benefit, they're aware of the pitfalls that Tyler Tech Munis brings occasionally. So there was more discussion about how we are going to manage the relationship between LCA, Raftellus, and subsequently Tyler Tech to make sure that we get the proper level of support that we deserve, we expect. I imagine there'll be a very well-defined SLA put in place to make sure that we have that support and then we can hold them accountable to them.
And you have seen the final result of what you're looking for, that because there are different stakeholders from your procurement, from your, from your accounting and so on and so forth. Everybody has seen the final result, what it's going to look like, and they have bought into the modules that you're buying.
Absolutely, and to an even deeper point than that, Brooke has actually lived in what the proper functionality of Munis can be. So she brings the experience of someone who has gone through an implementation, a successful implementation and successful usage of the application when it was configured properly in a standard accounting format for projects and how to operate the utility. So I think with Brooke on board, which is one of the major reasons that she was kind of picked to lead the project, her experience and what we expect to get out of Raftellus, I think it puts us in a pretty strong stance right now.
Thank you.
Any other board questions? Any questions? All right, we have before us a capital project authorization for $569,076 for consulting services. That includes a professional services authorization with Raftellus for $399,076. I need a motion and a second.
Motion.
Motion by Amir, second by Ted. Any questions? All right, voice vote on this, please.
Okay. Thank you. So this is a roll call vote for the ERP Munis reimplementation project, capital project authorization, and professional services for Raftellus. Brian Noggle.
Yes.
Scott Bieber. Dick Bonner. Norma Cusick.
Yes.
Thank you, Norma. Ted Lyons. Linda Rosenfeld. Linda? We must have lost her. Jeff Morgan.
Yes.
Amir Famili.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, motion passed. Thank you.
Mhm.
Good luck, Brooke.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on, the next item under Finance and Administration is the 2023 budget. It's a preliminary review, it's discussion time. Welcome to the board.
Yes. So for this one, Ed and I will kind of go back and forth a little bit. I'll kick things off and then turn it over to Ed to get into some of the details. But as you all are aware, we have a process for going through our board presentations for the budget, and we like to start with an opening presentation that is a little more broad brush and talking about the assumptions and the key factors that are affecting the upcoming budget as we see it. We do have a good portion of the budget figures already compiled, but we're not presenting those today. We'll go through all of those details at the next meeting, which is actually just a week from today, and we'll focus today on the budget assumptions and the the overview pieces. So to do that, I am going to share my screen and share a presentation about the budget assumptions. I want to make sure that since I'm remote that this is working.
That's good.
Yes, good. Okay, cool. So as I mentioned today, we're focusing on the preliminary review of the 2023 budget and the major assumptions that have gone into developing the budget this far. We'll start with today some budget assumptions related to our strategic initiatives, go over some staffing changes that are being proposed and some other basic assumptions. And then Ed will go into each fund and some major factors that are affecting budget results that we're expecting. And then we do have a summary of what we're expecting the 2023 budget to look like that will show. And then we have a number of meetings coming up that will go into more of the details. So at the next meeting on the 19th, we'll get into the details of the preliminary budget. And then in October, we'll get a more refined review of the budget to you, as well as get into rates for 2023. We'll be asking for budget approval on October 24th, and then rate adoption in November. So that's the look ahead at the budget process. So just to get started, well, I'm going to go through this rather quickly because this should be very familiar to you. The review of the strategic initiatives that we did a couple of months ago was really kind of to help you understand where we are with our strategic plan implementation, but then also we're going to keep moving on that and what's involved for 2023 or what we have in mind for 2023. So there shouldn't be anything really new here. The first one relates to asset management, and we've been talking about this for quite some time and what's involved with this. And we really are just beginning to get started with developing a strategic asset management plan. We expect that plan to be a multi-year program that will help us develop our overall asset management approach. And so we want to make sure we have resources in the 2023 budget for that, as well as for the full year staffing of the Director of Engineering and Asset Management. That's a position we've been talking about and are currently advertising for. Related to process improvement, we just talked about this one. The major driver for 2023 is the re-implementation of the MUNIS system. So we will be including in the 2023 budget significant resources related to that project, the consultant support, the software implementation, and staffing and other technical resources that we'll need to support that project. Another big one is water and sewer capacity, and Phil DePoe is presenting to us on a pretty regular basis the work that we're doing in this arena. So again, no surprises there that we're going to be spending significant energy next year on Act 537 plan development, as well as some other capacity related studies. The upper Western Lehigh interceptor pump station is going to kick off and get into construction phase next year. So we'll see that in there, as well as some other studies related to pretreatment plants and upper system water system. So we'll have some resources budgeted in 2023, primarily consultant support for those projects. And then lastly, as it relates to operational excellence, falls kind of into two categories. Andrew Moore has been working on our small systems. As you are aware, our small systems do pose some unique and special challenges when it comes to regulatory compliance and operational challenges. And so he's working on the small systems process control and instrumentation plan and working on implementing that in 2023. A key component of that will be the request for an additional compliance technician in the plant operations group. That compliance technician would be very much focused on the process control sampling and monitoring that's required to help us better manage the small systems and enhance performance there. And then we have a variety of other projects that we've been talking about: lead service line replacements, a review and update of our emergency response plan, as well as the large diameter valve and maintenance program, maintenance and rehab program. So those are resources that we'll need to build into the 2023 budget as well. So we put all that together. It's a lot of initiatives that are extremely important to LCA, and wanted to call those out as major thrusts for the 2023 budget. And how they impact the budget is shown on this slide. You can see the breakdown by those four main categories of what we're seeing as budget impacts of the main initiatives we've talked about. So a total of almost $3.5 billion going into the budget for those projects and those key initiatives. You can see that most of it is really focused in the process improvement, that Munis reimplementation project, as well as consultant support for the water and wastewater, mostly the wastewater capacity program, and then some other areas as well. Before I move on, any questions or discussion on the strategic initiatives and how we've captured them here for our 2023 budget? And if not, we'll move forward into some staffing changes. This is a little repetitive because we've talked about these in the last couple of slides, a couple of them. But just to give you the quick overview. So currently we have 171 positions budgeted for 2022. However, 10 of them currently are vacant or open due to staff turnover and retirements and various challenges in the job market right now. So we have 161 current employees, 10 open positions budgeted. And then for 2023, we're proposing to add 3 new positions to the organization, and that would bring the total budgeted headcount to 174. The 3 new positions are shown at the bottom of the slide. The Director of Engineering and Asset Management we've talked about. The Plant Operations Compliance Technician, that what I just mentioned as part of our strategic program related to operational excellence. And then the third one is this training coordinator for human resources. This was actually discussed last year for last year's budget and was ultimately not filled. So it's still a new position that has not been filled, and we're planning to fill that, or we'd like to fill that in 2023. We have some other staffing changes that are not part of the headcount addition, but just wanted to mention temporary staffing to support the Munis project is a critical component of that project. And when we were talking about temporary staffing, we're really talking about folks like Todd and Brooke and others who will be spending a significant portion of their year next year on the Munis project. Will need to delegate into their staff some of their current responsibilities. And those folks who are going to be keeping the regular day-to-day functions going will need some support as well. And so some temporary staffing kind of at the front line, either whether it's customer service or billing or accounting support, to kind of backfill for those folks who are really dedicating their time to the Munis project on a very temporary basis for next year. We also are planning some temporary staffing related to succession planning. And when I say temporary staffing, what I really mean is overlap. So we'll hire an employee, a few months in advance of a planned retirement for certain positions so that we have time for training and knowledge transfer. And we've identified a couple of those key positions within our 2023 budget. It's not a headcount addition, but it doesn't impact the staffing budget. So we put all that together in terms of the headcount changes, and we end up with a personnel budget, a total personnel budget for 2023 estimated at $19.9 million. This is a very significant portion of our budget, and that's why we spend a little bit of additional time talking about it. calling out the fact that it's a 9.2% change over the 2022 forecast, which seems like a lot, but I do want to make sure we're aware of what goes into that change. So our 2022 forecast for personnel is approximately $18.3 million. And then the 2023 budget is estimated at $19.9 million. That change is partially related to the staff additions, but is also greatly impacted by filling those 10 vacant positions, or it assumes the 10 vacant positions that we have today will be filled. So that's a very large component of the increase, is just filling the positions that we have open today. We also, of course, have wage increases, and some of those are dictated by union contracts, and some health insurance cost increases that we're estimating at 5% for next year. Okay, so at this point, I think we'll turn it over to Ed to go through the funds and some key factors. Ed, are you ready?
Yeah, just going back to this number before we move on.
Sure.
Just so that y'all understand the significance of the 10 vacant positions. That says 9.22. If we would have said that the 10 vacant positions would have been filled throughout this year, your net labor increase would have been somewhere in the neighborhood of high 4.9 or 5%. So you can see that you're getting another 4% hit by the open positions that will now be filled. So just for reference, it's when we say the 9%, not all that bad when we start to backfill the 10 positions. It comes out to be in the neighborhood of 5%, which I think is strikingly different story when you're looking at it.
Thanks, Ed. Okay, Ed, do you want to cover this one, or?
Oh, that's all right. You can give yourself. Okay. So the budget assumes that we're going to start to normalize again from the pre-pandemic stuff that we used to do, including some travel, some training, the pandemic situation also took us away from some of the maintenance that we wanted to do. So we think we're building back up to a more normal type set of operations and administration as we move along in 2023, apart from what we had to do in the COVID world. We are looking for more support for internal training. We're going to do a lot more safety training. We're going to do a lot more in terms of train the trainer to enhance the timing of our safety training. And we also need to spend some money looking at our different facilities in terms of, I'll call it site security, ground security, things like that. And to do that, we're going to get some help, some professional help in terms of layout, fencing, cameras, stuff like that. In terms of the just normal inflationary impact, we ended up with 3.75% as an inflation factor. I know there's some experts out there who want to say it's going to be a little bit less than that, but based on how the increases this year got phased, I think as we look at year-to-year adjusted number is going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 3.75%. So I think that's a good number for us to look in terms of spending effects. The lease rates for the city division obviously are by agreement, and they will change as a result of the normal agreement of 2.5 plus the CPI factor. Suburban division wastewater rates pretty much by agreement, given the nature of the agreements with the signatory group. And suburban division water revenue growth, well, we said 2% in the CAT plan. We're still holding to that volume growth in the budget as well.
Question. The city division lease rates by agreement, you cited the fact that it's the CPI plus 2.5%.
2.5%. 2.5% base increase that goes on for a couple.
Plus the CPI.
Plus the CPI.
What do you, just to chat here, what do you think that CPI number might
The
be?
CPI will probably be a little bit north of 7%.
So we're looking at a rate increase of 9–10% for the city of Hamilton.
Yeah, you'll probably get close to that, almost 10.
That's actually on a future slide too, so we can look at that in more detail.
Okay. So Lisa pretty much covered what the major impact is on the internal service side, just some of the commentary there. You'll see that we're laid out by department, as we've talked about over the years. And I have to say hats off to the accounting group for not having any history, because our ledger does not allow us to do departmentalization of actual spending. But they set up the structure, the way that the organization is laid out, set the structure up so that we can at least create a foundation for doing this in the future when we can actually track this. So we are somewhat departmentalized, and you can see the different departments there in terms of executive and communications, finance, HR, and then service and technology, the way they're broken up, and plant operations as well, and with a bigger engineering and asset management department. So altogether, that'll be about $3.4 million. Affecting it again is the implementation of the ERP re-implementation project. We're talking about $1.5 million total impact. Non-personnel costs will be up about $549,000. That's 19%. Again, most of that is coming from the consulting realm that we've already talked about as a result of the strategic initiatives. And then some inflationary impact on the rate that we chose at 3.75%. So generally speaking, across the board to all three funds, we're expecting to see, as you would look at personnel costs and G&A, you're going to see some bigger hits and increases to them particular categories as compared to some of the other discretionary spending categories because of the consulting and the strategic initiatives and stuff like that. So,
And is this setup that we're looking at here fit right into Munis in the way it's going to be?
it doesn't fit into Munis as we have it now. But what we have made a very concerted effort to say how we want Munis to look like with respect to departmentalization, the responsibility accounting, and we are trying, the team will be tasked with laying out a structure that allows us to do exactly what we're talking about here. So I think that's it for internal services. Now we'll talk about suburban water. We are going to see some expense increase, again, predominantly coming from G&A and personnel costs. So they're going to get their proportionate share of the increases from both them groups. They will have an inflation impact. Capital budget is going to be, it looks like it's going to be in the neighborhood of $6.9 million. I think that one's pretty solid right now. We completed the borrowing for suburban water, and at this point in time, the only thing that we've done is take money to pay the financing fees. I've not asked for a drawdown yet, and I'm kind of holding on to doing that based on the rate of spending that's going on. The big kicker will be when they start to do the main replacement, we'll start to see some more money. So I'm kind of hedging against the inflation by not asking for the money too soon. And we'll probably take about $3.8 million in 2022 from that. And I'm sorry, $3.8 million in 2023 from that. And that's a little bit different than what we had originally planned, but the relationship with Fulton on this loan is going to be that we can basically massage the drawdowns, whatever makes sense for us at the time that we're doing the projects. We did talk about, when we did the cap plan, we said that there was going to be a revenue need of 5.5%, with 2% coming from growth and volumes, and another 3.5% rate impact. We are still holding to that in the 2023 budget. So I was happy to see that we were not going to have any surprise in the budget on suburban water. Lastly, on suburban water, we will be doing a water rate study, and that's in process right now. On the wastewater side, this one, again, same thing. You're going to get a proportionate share of personnel and internal service cost increases as a result of strategic impacts. The inflation impact, 3.75%. Altogether, this is coming up with a 4.0% increase against 2022 forecast. So what is really happening is the rate of increase on some of the spending for utilities, services, et cetera, is not as high as the labor, and that's actually keeping it in check at 4%. Capital budget's around 5.9. That might change a little bit based on some of the recent discussions with the signatories. And so we'll be looking at that number this week. Essentially what it means, given that CAPEX level and the expense increases, we will need about 2.9, almost 3% in additional revenue, which is kind of a normal number for the budget, and kind of even stays in line with the capital plan as well. Signatory impact will vary by group due to PAYGO impacts, pump parks station generator project, Lehigh Relief Interceptor Phase 1, and signatory user charge report to be issued in early October. So, and we're having discussions with them about what's in operating expenses and what's in PAYGO as well. On the city division, operating expenses look like they'll be up about 6.3 from forecast. Again, the same situation as the other two funds. Most of that is being driven by personnel and internal service cost increases, along with inflation. The capital budget will be 13.7 million. We are not borrowing. So going back to wastewater, there's no borrowing for wastewater at this moment. There's no borrowing for the city other than closing on the Pinvest loan that we had thought we would be closing on in 2022, now falling over into 2023. There's the rate increase, CPI of 7.6 plus the 2.5 gets you to 10.1. And with capital cost recovery charges kind of staying a little bit flat, that volume pulls it down to about a 9.8% overall increase year to year.
I have a comment to interrupt. Just look at the optics of this. The suburban water rate increase you cited was roughly 3.5%. The suburban wastewater rate increase, I don't know what that.
About 3.
Will be 3. Yeah. And the city rate increase will be 10%. This is not a criticism, it's just an optical fact that people are going to look at this and say, what's going on? You know, why is this? And there's reasons for this. We all know them, but it's just I think it's not something we should be aware of. That the optics are not what we'd all be looking for, I don't think.
What was the CPI last year? What was the, like, for 2021 ballpark? Like the rate increase would have been,
I'm trying to remember the CPI increase going in, I think was a little bit north of 4.5, almost 5, or maybe a little bit north of
Well,
that.
we had a more significant rate impact for 2022 because of the phasing in of the new rate structure with the amended lease agreement with the city. We had a phase 1 that we did in 2020, a phase 2 that we did in 2022, and then we'll do the final phase in next year in 2024. So the rate impact last year was more significant because of that phasing, and the CPI was a more normal 3.1% or something in that range last year.
Yeah, I thought it was a little bit higher than 3, but I may be wrong.
It might have been. I don't recall the specific number. I don't have it in front of me, but you're just trying to make the comment that the rates are increasing this year, primarily driven by CPI, by the inflationary impact, whereas last year the increase was driven more by the phased-in approach of the new rates under the amended lease agreement. So we have a couple more years of those to go, and then we hopefully we'll be able to level out. Also, as our cash increases, the ability to do some different things with rates will become available to us.
Comment again, and again, I'm not clear on all this, but the suburban water rate increase is driven by who? We estimate 3.5%. And that number comes from, how is that derived? How do we decide how much to increase the rate in suburban water?
Assuming that there's going to be X volume effect, it basically is nothing more than a calculation of once you take your operating expenses, strip out depreciation, which is non-cash, you add debt service, you add in.
So it's based on cost.
Yeah, it's basically you add in the coverage and you say that's the amount of revenue you need, and that's why I come up with.
And it's based on real costs.
That is, or budgeted cost, yes.
A budget, okay, budget cost.
Yes.
And again, I'm just talking here. In terms of the city, we have a CPI here of estimated 7%, and that's estimated cost, not a real cost perhaps. It's something we're estimating, right?
Based on the agreement, yes.
Yeah, based on the agreement, we're permitted to increase by the CPI
Yes.
plus X%. And over a period of time, that CPI may or may not reflect the actual real costs increase of operations. Is that true? It's a plug. It's it's.
Yes and no. And the only reason I say that is because at 7%, we say that that's a reflection of the increase of the cost that we endured in 2022. And we did have, in fact, some significant inflation in 2022 that has played out in actuality.
Yeah. I guess where I'm going with this, and I won't change the subject, is that we're a nonprofit, and our revenues generated from expenses plus G&A and so forth and so on, and that it should not be generated by let's say the national CPI per se, but basically based on costs that reflect our actual operating costs of doing business. And
Right.
just a comment.
The CPI is the historical number from 2022. It's not a forecast.
No, it's not a forecast. It is an actual
number.
CPI indexed number.
But it's based on a national number.
Yes.
What our actual cost increase, or what our actual cost increase of doing business here in the Lehigh Valley.
It could be more than that.
Could be more than that, or it could be less than that. And when you get to these really high rates of CPI, which we are all enduring right now, it can be some distortion.
Yeah. If I could just comment on that, Ted, First of all, the CPI, it is regionalized, so it's the Northeast region, if that matters. I'm not so sure. But the formula that's in the lease agreement is a formula that, it is set by City Council and LCA board, and putting this agreement together is what we agreed to. However, it's important, I think, for us to remember that part of the lease amendment that was done in 2020 also includes the future ability to adjust rates downward once we hit certain financial thresholds, so that the rate will feel more like a cost of service rate in the future once we hit those financial thresholds. We're just not there yet in terms of the cash balance that we need to support this very large capital investment that's needed in the Allentown system. So we're growing the rates to make sure we have enough to cover capital. But once we hit those thresholds, then we start to be able to provide rate relief so that it reflects more of an actual cost of service. We're going to get there. It's just going to take some time.
Good, well, it's good, I'm glad we're all aware of that, and just in case comments are made or you see a headline in the paper, city increases 10%, suburban, increase 2%, and we're all scrambling around trying to say, well, you have to read page 84, subparagraph B of the agreement that says this is how it all plays out.
Right.
That's it. Thank you.
Quick question, Ed. So in other words, you think we're going to have to raise our rates by the CPI factor in order to keep ourselves where we want to be? In other words, we don't have to raise the rates to reflect the CPI factor.
Let's just say that part of the reason why we needed the amendment, and one of the things that we could look at that Lisa just mentioned in terms of the ability to go back on rates, is the level of capital. And at this point in time, that calculation that she talked about had some leveling out of capital, and that's not what's going on right now. We, at one time, were just barely able to spend $3 million in capital, and now we're setting out a budget that says we're going to have 13.7. So I would say that it's in our best interest right now to continue to follow the agreement in terms of rates and the ability to capture the capital dollars required to take care of a system that needs a lot of things yet.
So the plan is to grab the whole CPI that we can get?
Yes. Yes. And that would, like Lisa had mentioned, there is a period of time, given a number of thresholds, and capital is a part of that, where we see that's kind of normalized, but it's not normalized right now.
Yeah, thanks, Ed.
Okay?
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
So this is what we look like in terms of net income, cash flows, debt service coverage ratio, and altogether on the net income side, the funds are going to be on the positive side. Suburban water 2+, wastewater kind of a little, well, less than 500,000. City division at 4.9, so altogether 7.6. I guess the good thing is that's positive. Forecast for 2022 is positive, budget was positive. And at this point in time, the variance between 23 and 22 is just a couple $100,000 in terms of net income. Cash flows, as we're looking at right now, suburban water is positive. City division is positive as well. Wastewater is a little bit on the negative side in terms of cash flows. Debt service coverage ratio, 1.88, 9.17, 2.19, all of them above our internal target of 1.2 also. No issues with respect to that. Even with new borrowing in suburban water, we're good. So that's what we look like right now. I don't expect that there's going to be some changes much in the income side to water or probably on the city division side as well, given some of the things that we're talking about in concerning capital and wastewater, that might swing a little bit. So that's something that we'll be looking at this week. But I mean, all the debt service coverage ratios are on the good side, and that's a key measure for us. And if somebody on the outside looking in, they'd say we're doing fairly well with it. So what's left? Finalize some of the budget numbers, like I said, particularly wastewater. The suburban water rate study is in process. We're gathering up lots of stuff. Actually, the staff is working on that, and Linda's chartered with doing a lot of work on this, and she's very diligent with this. So we'll be gathering that up, and then suburban wastewater signatory user charge report. And that's going to go out in October, and I think we're looking at maybe some enhancement of the way that looks to some of the, I'll call it some of the members. So that's the work left. In the next meetings will be, well, we'll do it again Monday. So Monday we'll look at more cash flow stuff. Yeah, we'll look at more CAPEX detail. And then we'll have a better idea on the 10th with respect to another pass at the budget in terms of income and cash flows. And then hopefully be all done by the 24th so you can have a last look at it and we can either say yay or nay. And then following that we're like I said, working on the water rate study that we can actually adopt the rates that make sense by the 14th of November.
Okay, thanks, Ed. Lisa, anything more?
Nope. That's what we have for today. You know, as I mentioned, we like to start the budget season off with just sort of an overview of the broad brush assumptions and key thrusts or key drivers for the budget as we're putting it together, and we'll get into the nitty-gritties next week.
Okay, thanks, Lisa.
Yep.
Any further comments, questions?
Just quick questions.
Amir?
So I do recognize the implementation units is going to be 2 years down the road and so on and so forth. Do you anticipate a productivity or efficiency that we can redeploy resources to other projects at the end of the 2 years?
I'm not sure I'm getting the gist.
Well, I mean, the system that you put them in place is bringing some efficiency in the work that you're doing. So it has to free up some resources.
Yes.
Correct. So do you anticipate that you know, it's going to be 1 FD, 2 FDs that we can take and redeploy to the other works? Is that part of the, you know, I'm thinking ahead for the budgeting process as we go through. You know, is this something that help us on our budgeting process as well?
I think it's a great question. I mean, the whole intent of this is to make it easier for our internal teams to operate in a more efficient manner. So I don't know that we've thought about freeing up FTE time to that extent, but it's certainly something we're thinking about.
And I'll just say that I think that we have thought about it kind of in every portion, every part of the organization that touches Munis or uses Munis, looking at it as increments of time, probably not an individual person, but really increments of time, Todd's time, Linda's time, Brooke's time. We have folks who dedicate almost half of their time to payroll entry, and being able to free that time up to do other work. The time that goes into preparing the financial reports requires multiple people in the accounting and finance team to be able to present what Ed presents to you every month. So I think there's significant opportunity there that hasn't necessarily been quantified in terms of which people and how much time exactly, but great recognition of significant efficiency.
Yeah, I would tend to agree that it's not so much that we're gonna be able to say, here's 3 people that we no longer need. I think it's more along the lines of, there are many things, even on the financial side, that we just don't get to because we're bogged down in, I mean, I hate to use the word, but we spend so much time gathering the data to get it ready for reporting that I could envision it with a system that works well. You know, and I use the word way too loosely at times, with push button reporting, and be able to spend more time analyzing costs and looking for ways to reduce costs than gathering the data and reporting. So that's some of the things that and I'm just speaking from finance, where I see it more, the ability to do more things that add value to the business that we're not getting to right now.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's move on to the next topic then. All right, we have an item under water, water main replacement program, cycle 6. It's seeking approval. It's a goldenrod documents in our board package, and it's digitally pages 19 to 24.
Okay, this is for this year's suburban water main replacement project. We call it cycle 6 because it's the 6th annual water main replacement project. We're asking for construction phase authorization. This project is located entirely in North Whitehall Township in the Schneppsville area. It's about 1.1 mile of developer-installed water main that has been very problematic, and the prioritization this year focused on exclusively that system. And this was with coordination with operations, with feedback from operations, breakage history. We have a high water loss problem up there in North Whitehall, and this will help correct that. So Jason is going to present the nuts and bolts of this project. People talk about a bid irregularity that we have had to deal with, and we'll ask for some input from Mike as well to address that issue. So Jason?
Thanks, John. Thank you, everybody, for having me here today. Like we typically do here, like we do with our Allentown project, this is the suburban main replacement project. This is cycle 6. Previously, the suburban division design side, cycles 4 through 6, design portion was reviewed and approved by you guys a few years ago. This is cycle 6, construction phase, like Chuck has previously mentioned. We're going to replace approximately 1.11 miles of water main in the North Whitehall, specifically in one development. So it'll be a contiguous area, and we're not going to be spread throughout our suburban division. Like Chuck also made mention, the driver for the project was for failing infrastructure. The system itself in North Whitehall is a plastic system, so plastic main and plastic services, where we were seeing some high water lossage in the system, which was brought into light from our operations department through some of their leak and data logging expertise. So the project funding itself will be all through the LCA Suburban Division. Like I previously had mentioned, back in October of 2017, you guys authorized the design portion of this project. Talking about the bids that we received, the project was advertised in the beginning of August. We had a mandatory pre-bid meeting on August 16th, and we opened bids on August 24th. When we opened bids, we had 4 bidders that did place a bid. The lowest in proposal cost was from Shane Line Excavating. However, Shane Line failed to include in its bid submission a signed bid form, which is contrary to the requirements of LCA's bid specification. After reviewing and with Mike, our solicitor here, Shane Line's bid has been determined to be materially defective, as the failure to submit a signed bid form potentially deprives LCA of assurances that the bid will be effective, enforceable, and guaranteed. Additionally, under the Pennsylvania Municipal Authorities Act, a construction contract may only be awarded to the lowest responsive and responsible bidder. Under Pennsylvania law, Chain Line Excavating would not be considered the lowest responsive and responsible bidder. The second lowest bidder in cost was Joel and Bradley. Their bid amount is below our engineer's cost of opinion at $3.6 million. That was our engineer's cost of opinion. Joel and Bradley's bid was $2.3 million. Joel and Bradley has successfully completed numerous water main replacement projects for LCA in the suburban division. They did cycles 3, 4, and 5. Additionally, they're currently working on cycle 6 of Allentown's project, and they previously also did cycles 2, 3, and 5 of the city of Allentown main replacement projects. So therefore, we recommend awarding the general construction contract to Joel and Bradley, subject to the receipt of necessary performance bonds and insurances and other required documents. Also, as part of the capital project authorization, we're looking to have the board award 2 professional service authorizations, one to Gannett Fleming for construction engineering and management, and then one to Keystone Consulting Engineers for construction inspection. Both of those professional service authorizations are a not to exceed estimate and proposal. So what we're looking for today is approval of the capital project authorization for $2.566 million, which includes a professional service authorization of $45,000 to Gannett Fleming, and also a professional service authorization to Keystone Consulting Engineers for $75,000 for inspection-related services. Does anybody have any questions that I could answer?
Yeah, I have a question, Jason. When they didn't submit a bid form, a signed bid form, what's the normal procedure? Do you call them up and say, hey, you didn't submit a signed bid form? Would you like to submit a signed bid form?
No, we did not do that. Mike, you might be able to.
Okay, yeah, I just want to be clear that we're not gonna, by awarding I'm glad Bradley's getting, I guess, because they have a lot of experience putting in our water mains. But there's no chance that Chain Line will have any kind of case for coming back at us and saying that we should have given it, they should have had the opportunity to sign a bid form and we should have given it to them.
Well, I don't think they have a right anyways to cure the defect in that way. I think if there would ever be a cure of a bid, it would be up to the board's indulgence to do this. To do that, in this particular case, just so the board can kind of picture the situation, the bid form, well, there's the specifications, which is, can be like 100 pages long in terms of all the rules and regulations and the technical specifications. And then there's a 2-page bid form that ultimately there's someone signs it and there's some numbers put into it. Bid. Not only was the bid form not signed, the bid form itself was not supplied, wasn't downloaded as part of the bid package. And then the bid form will contain representations, acknowledgements, and agreements itself, making up part of the 2 pages. Quite frankly, I can't imagine a situation where someone's bid would be considered valid without a signed bid form. It's like someone handing you a contract that's not signed.
How do you know their number if the bid form was not submitted?
I can fill in that one. That's pen bid, okay? So it's an electronic bidding service that we've used now for the last probably 12, 14 years here. And the bidder fills in his or her numbers on a bid form, with the unit price, and automatically extends the unit price. Quantity times unit price equals extended amount. The pen bid form automatically extends that and provides that. But that bidder is required to upload documents as part of their bid. The documents including the signed, scanned bid form, the bid bond, agreement of surety, and there's other like qualifications and experience statements, similar project history, that sort of thing, that they're required to upload. Now, in the instructions to bidders, there's a statement that the authority can waive any and all formalities, but I do not believe this is a formality that can be waived, because it's not a complete bid.
So Chuck, did they upload anything that they were supposed to?
Yes, they did, I believe they uploaded their bid bond, they did not upload a signed bid form. That's what they failed to do.
So Mike, if the bidder submits their bid and it's accurate, they have 3 days by law that they can withdraw it,
Yeah.
right? So, I mean, in theory, I guess maybe moving forward, if something like this happened, is there a period that we could, or so anybody could contact the bidder and say, hey, this is missing? Are they allowed to amend that bid in that period? So that doesn't apply?
No, there's
Okay.
very limited, now remember, there's laws about this. It's not so much that you can just do what you think as appropriate to a particular situation. Although there's language put into the specifications and in the advertising, you'll see where defects can be waived and so forth. The actual law on that is that your ability to do that is very restricted. And I've seen cases where people have tried to do that and the court said, no, you can't waive a material defect. In this particular circumstance, that this is almost, in those other cases, it's kind of the tail of the dog that is the problem, right? In this particular case, the person did not even download a signed bid. Again.
They submitted a bid.
No, they did, well, they submitted
a number from somebody.
Yeah, they submitted the bid. It was the pen bid number that was generated by that worksheet online.
Right.
They just didn't submit. They're also required to submit a signed, scanned bid form, like, you know, the old-fashioned paper bid form.
Yes.
Where they handwrite their numbers and handwrite the amount, you know?
And
they did not do that, and they signed it,
They
yes.
submitted their bid bond.
They did submit a bid bond.
So they essentially forgot to sign the bid form.
and submitted.
And submitted, correct.
And some, yeah.
Yeah.
Or you might have signed it, but they forgot to submit it. Yeah, so the question becomes then, is it what's material here? They obviously put a bid together, they put an estimate together, they submitted the number, they provided a bid bond. For some crazy reason, they didn't sign the bid form.
Right.
And the question then becomes what's material and what's immaterial, right?
Well,
Suppose this number here was, let's suppose that this is $200-some thousand it's gonna cost.
Yes, yeah.
Suppose it was 300,000, 400,000. How, when does things become immaterial and material?
Well, let me just say, the material, it doesn't depend upon the amount of.
I know, I'm kidding.
But yeah, I understand what you're saying. And so you say, well, what would we do if it got to an absurd number? And what you could do, you have the right to rebid the project, basically, to get what you think is the appropriate number for the project. This is a board decision. You know, what I have said, you know, is just a recommendation, what I think from a legal analysis. The board did reserve the right to waive defects. Quite frankly, let's put it this way, let's put pen bid aside for a second, because what happens on the pen bid level where you get these numbers from is you need to put numbers electronically into the system, because they'll then calculate and send and punch out as a convenience the results, basically, okay? They don't look at the documents, it's just the results of what happened. If someone had, let's say in the old days, submitted to you their bid documents and it did not include a bid, I can't imagine that would be considered a valid bid.
Well, you never would have known the number back in the old days, because the old days, the sheet of paper has the number on it and you sign it.
Well, you don't know, but actually that's true and not true. Someone could, in other words, in some bids, most bids, the lump sum amount is the important thing, right? But engineers sometimes ask for a breakdown of a bid that may not be part of the signed bid form, actually, or maybe on a different page kind of thing. So you could know numbers and not get a signed bid form even in the old days. But again, if you were to look at the documents that they put in, and there's probably 3 or 4, there's more than just a bid bond that was put in. you would see that they have put in, like I say, non-collusion affidavit. They put in their qualifications, they put in a bid bond, they may put a surety letter and about providing future bonds. And then there's no bid form.
Suppose this was your house, what would you do? Suppose your project in your backyard and you got submitted bids on a certain day and some guy forgot to sign the bid form and called you up the next day and said, oh, I forgot to sign this, let me come by and sign it. What would you do?
Well,
I'll tell you what I do.
yeah, I know, but it is a little bit different than that because there are some.
Of course there are, I'm being facetious.
Yeah, and if you don't think, well, it's a board decision.
So is there any, oh, I'm sorry, is there any precedent on this, Chuck? Has this ever happened before? And else that you remember, and that, I mean, I've seen it happen as well, because in fairness to Ted, the bid's due at 10 o'clock and 9:55, Ted's filling out his bid form and submitting everything, and so stuff gets overlooked.
Yeah,
But has this ever happened?
I've seen other irregularities, Jeff, with the conflict between the handwritten and the pen bid.
Right.
And I've seen other documents neglected to be included. I've not experienced a signed bid form not included.
I'll get you, Jim, but it's $233,000 difference for a signature. And it's absolutely important, required to have that bid document, no doubt about it. I would not waive the right to have a bid document, but I would think I would give them another chance to say, fill it out. I mean, why didn't you do it? And it's just an oversight. But from our standpoint, our customer's standpoint, it's $233,000. Now, do we have any other information about the company's qualifications, experience? We certainly know what the others.
Our engineer did check them out, and they have performed projects of similar scope and nature. And so there's nothing overtly negative about the contractor. We've not worked with them, but apparently they are qualified.
Have they ever submitted bids before to us for other projects?
I've not seen them. I don't know if you recall, Jason.
Will they show up at mandatory pre-bid meeting?
Yeah.
What was the question, Scott? I couldn't hear you exactly.
Well, I asked if they showed up at the mandatory pre-bid meeting,
Yes, they did.
and also whether they've ever bid any of our projects before.
No, they've never bid any of our
Where are they
projects.
from?
They're from Phoenixville?
Phoenixville.
Yes.
Okay, Jim, you had a.
Yeah, just, so we're getting ready to put a project out as well, so my question is, oftentimes, the old days, when you put it in an envelope, it was pretty clear, you filled your numbers in with a pen anyway. Is this an issue that's related to the electronic piece of it, which any of us have tried to fill our taxes out online? It's easy to miss a form or a signature or something like that. Is that potentially what happened? Is there a way that we should be thinking about that on our future projects?
Well, I think we should be reminding bidders to make sure they include the signed bid form with their uploaded documents, But it's not like a keyboard error or anything that they made, that it was an oversight.
But my question is, could we, if we wanted to, go back to Shane Line and say, hey, look, you didn't sign a signed bid form, would you please submit a signed bid form?
I don't see why not.
Well, I think that would require some legal analysis, if that's what you want. It's up to the board.
Maybe because you run into the case where the other bidders might know that the one company did not fill out the form properly, did not sign it, and therefore that bid should be negated. So the question comes down to rebidding or not rebidding.
Or material, what's material here?
I think it's material that they didn't sign. We don't have that document in our hand that says that they commit to this amount of money in this.
But it was an oversight. I mean, if you said to them, would you sign it? And they said, well, we're really not gonna sign it, well, that's something different. And they said, oh my God, we forgot to sign. And, boom, it's $250,000 for a signature.
Like Mike said, though, that if you want to go down that road, the cleanest thing is just throw in all the bids and rebid it.
Have you communicated to Bradley that they have won the bid for this project?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Have you communicated to Bradley that they have won this project?
They saw the bid results.
They'll see the bid results.
Yeah, the bid results are instantly available for public viewing.
Could there actually have been a problem on the pen bid side where the document was provided but didn't come through?
That would be highly unlikely. I suppose there could. I mean.
Okay, so
They're
maybe
processing.
just say the case where they actually did fill out the form. It's electronic signature, I assume.
No, it's not.
No, it's not.
It's a scan.
It's scanned, okay.
Yeah, the handwritten.
Somebody forgot to scan it.
So why don't we?
Maybe went for a cup of coffee in the office.
There's also a questionnaire and checkbox, you supplied this. So it's a full-on breakdown in pen bid, asking you the question, did you supply these things with your bid? And that wasn't even.
But so they went through all these steps, put all this together, submitted it, and they left out the key document.
And like I was saying, there is a questionnaire checklist of things did you do to submit your bid? And they still.
So why don't we table this and call up Shayline and tell them what happened? And make sure that that it was not an electronic mistake, that they admit that they forgot to submit the signed bid form.
And I'd like the legal aspect of this as well, to make sure that anything we decide to do is going to keep us protected.
Yeah.
Well, I think before you say we're to reach out to Shayline about this, I think you need to think about what the legalities and the appropriateness of doing that. Because if what you're saying is that, well, let's reach out to them and say, will you provide this to us now? Are you going to go down the road in the future if they provide it to you that you're going to award the bid to them? Because I guess what you have to be kind of feel comfortable with is that allowing them to quote unquote cure the defect at this point would be acceptable. Because if it's not, then what's the point of going through that process?
How about if we ask for rebidding for the whole project?
What's that?
Rebidding for the whole project.
Are you asking for that, or?
Can we ask for the rebidding for the whole project?
I would think that you could do that, but we probably should look at that, but normally you reserve the right to reject bids,
Under what circumstances would a board legitimately allow a cure?
So basically, there's some language in here, in this memo. It talks about whether the defect will, not supplying the bid will deprive the authority of that the bid will be effective, enforceable, and guaranteed, okay? So that's kind of some language that you'll see in court decisions. And obviously, by not having a signed bid, how are you going to, there's a question of how you would enforce the contract.
Well, obviously, we wouldn't allow the contract to move ahead without a signature. I mean, that's.
So your question is whether,
Is this more form than substance is what I'm driving at as a business person. We're talking about $250,000 here. Someone's going to come up with because somebody didn't sign a form. Now, if this is my private project and I ran a company, let me tell you, I'd allow them to sign the form and we'd move ahead. Stop the BS. Now, if for some reason they purposely didn't sign the form because they didn't want to be held legally liable, well, that's a whole other question. And I certainly agree with that. I'm just going to get hung up, and God bless the lawyers, thank God for the lawyers, but we're prudent about this and we're spending our people's money the proper way. That's all I'm saying.
Jason, you had another comment?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, a couple of years ago in the Allentown replacement project, there was an irregularity in the bidding, like Chuck was making, previously stating, where the written was different than what was entered on there. And we took the second lowest bidder at that point. And on that project, it was Joao and Bradley was the lowest. We ended up going with Dolly at that time because of the deficiency and defectiveness of the bid itself.
You didn't know which bid was the real bid. Yeah, in this case, we know what their bid is.
Jason, is there any urgency to administering this contract, time-wise, before the winter time or something like that, to get the
I
work
mean,
done?
this project is scheduled to go over the winter course itself, through construction. So that's where we're at there. We're substantially complete by late March of 2023. So all the pipe in the ground at that point.
Now, present a scenario here, in a situation where you have an irregularity between the pen bid form and the written form, I think the written form governs.
I would think so. I don't, yes, because the electronic submission of the stuff to PennVid, to my understanding or purposes, it's a matter of convenience because that can electronically calculate the bids. Whereas you have the signed, you don't sign that information. But I just wanted to say, just so you understand, because I think I see where this is headed a little bit. The reason why I was kind of quoting that language a little bit is because your ability to say, just give it to me, in a sense, and waive the defect goes to how material the defect is. Okay, so if it's something that you wouldn't feel comfortable accepting as it is, in a sense, or you don't think meets the rules as it is, that goes to whether or not you can waive that defect, because it's supposed to be a level playing field.
Yeah, okay.
But we're not asking to waive the defect.
No,
We're asking him to remedy the defect.
Yeah, but you're, yeah, I understand what you're saying, and there's somewhat of a difference in a sense, but you are, in a sense, you look at how it was provided, and it was provided without it, so.
Provided what?
It was provided without it.
Yeah.
So, but, you know, it's a board decision.
I think that $233,000 warrants a phone call to Shane Line, we get an answer, and then we table this at this meeting and decide at the next meeting.
Which is only a week away.
Which is a week away, by the way.
Yeah.
So at least we'll have that answer. Did they just overlook it? Then we can decide when we have full knowledge of what their intentions were for us to make a decision.
Brian, Brian, this is Norma Cusick. I have a quick question. The engineers bid was, the engineers gave us a number of 3,682,000 plus on this project. That was their cost estimate, and both Bradley, Shane Line, and Pact One all came in at 2 million plus. That's $1 million less than our engineers' bid opinion. Why is that? Where is that discrepancy of $1 million?
I didn't speak to the engineer, Jason did, but my assumption is that they've been seeing grossly inflated construction costs lately, and that was their attempt to reflect the current economy. And I don't know why we got a potential bargain here.
Correct, exactly. Gannon Fleming has done multiple water main replacement projects in the area, including Eastern Suburban over in Easton. They've just gotten awarded those projects also out in Carlisle, Harrisburg area. So their estimates are based upon what bids they have been receiving historically over the past year. So for the types of work that is going on for this project, on what they've already seen come in as bids, that's how they come up with their construction cost of opinion.
So one more question. I'm sorry, Norma, you have something else?
You have another question. I understand we're going to table this resolution, but will we be setting any precedent in, well, this person made one mistake, another person made another mistake. Legally, where do we stand if we give one person a second chance and another person we don't?
Well, I don't know the answer to that offhand, but I would think each bid situation is determined on its own merits.
How many times has it ever happened, Chuck?
This situation, I don't recall, Ted.
No.
I mean, other times, I don't know why we've been seeing bid irregularities recently, but it doesn't happen much. And like the pen bid irregularities, sometimes a contractor might put a decimal point in the wrong location, and you can tell that price is definitely wrong, and it conflicts with the written form, and that, in that case, the written form governs. But no, I'm not seeing this.
One more thing for me, when the bids are submitted by the individual contractors, they are not aware of what the others have bid.
That's correct, until after the
Since the
open.
bids have been opened, they are now aware of all the other bidders.
Exactly, and that's the drawback, in my opinion, to rebidding the project, because they all know.
The only good news is all the prices would drop.
Maybe.
You don't know that.
It could be the other way around, they could say, oh, I can make more money than this.
Well.
So I still believe we ought to table this, get that phone call, get that answer, and then weigh all this at the next meeting and make a decision.
Okay, need a motion to
Sorry,
table or
Jason,
not?
but.
If
You
I'm,
need a motion to table? No.
Well, it's on the agenda, so it probably makes sense to have that motion.
Okay.
I have a question.
All right, Linda.
All right, you're gonna call the company and say, why did you forget this? And, if I were them, I would say, oh my God, I just forgot it. That kind of thing. Why not just rebid if that's what you think you're gonna do?
Well, I'll try to answer this, Linda. I would say for one thing, we got really good prices.
I
And-
understand.
And then, if we rebid it, it's going to push us out another month. I mean, as Jason indicated, we are projecting to finish this project over the winter, but we're experiencing a high water loss rate up there in North Whitehall. We'd like to remedy that situation as soon as possible. So there is a bit of urgency assigned to this project.
I got one question.
Good.
Is the $3.6 million now public information?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
You mean for the capital project authorization?
It's on our website.
It's not 3, but it's 2.
You're talking the engineer's cost of opinion?
Oh, the engineers, yes.
It's always there. It's always there.
Yeah.
It's
available at the time
All right.
of bidding.
Well, it might be less now too, because of these results of the bids.
my viewpoint is that I would vote no, that they don't get a second chance. Each bid is a unique situation. It's the principal thing to start their business in its future. If they're not willing to follow all the rules and provide the data that is necessary, I would say no, that they don't get a second chance. The additional item is what has been suggested is that they now know what their competition is offering. And I just don't think that's fair.
Well, they know it anyway because they're all publicized instant the bids are put in.
Okay,
That's the point.
what?
So no one's gonna change
I
their
mean, they
prices.
screwed up and I'm not gonna sit.
Well, having been on the other side for many years,
I just got a no vote.
let me tell you,
Okay.
it's easy for this to happen.
All right, Jason.
One thing else I would add to here, comparative to what Joao and Bradley has been authorized for the Allentown project, their bid is in line with the similar type of work that's out there. And I think even looking at their number for the suburban project here that they put out is actually a pretty darn good deal. And I think that was based upon being at a one regional spot that their mobilization cost and demote cost were trumped that. So.
We're not
Yeah,
suggesting
I'm
you
just-
should rebid the thing, but I just want that one piece of information before I make the vote, so.
What is the piece of information you're specifically looking for?
Well, the phone call that says, what happened, you didn't submit this, and he might say, we thought we did, But again, when we have that little piece of information, we'll make a decision.
Okay, because the reason why I'm just asking for some clarification, Brian, is that you're not asking Chuck to go tell them to give us a signed bid form at this point. You just want to know what happened. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's important.
Okay, I was getting a little mixed message there. I thought we wanted
Right.
to ask for a signed bid form.
What happened?
what happened, because I think if you ask them for the signed bid form, you're going down the road of whether or not it would, you start the process of whether it's gonna be cured at that point.
Right.
Yeah, it might take off Bradley too. They might say, hey, how come you giving them a second chance?
Correct.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, if you waive the defect, Bradley could attempt to challenge the bid too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
I make a motion, we table it and get an answer as to why they did it, not necessarily that we're asking them to submit a signed bid form.
And then we'll revisit this on next meeting.
What if upon discussing it with them, they just take it upon themselves to submit a signed bid form? Does that matter? to
No, we
us?
don't have to accept that.
Not to accept.
Okay.
Motion made,
Second.
seconded by Ted. All right,
Okay.
voice vote.
Hey, everyone, I'm back. I've been following along, just keeping my camera off because I have a bad internet connection here. You're looking for a voice vote on the motion to table the Cycle 6 Suburban Division water main replacement authorization. Is that correct?
That's correct, pending the results of a phone call to the lowest bidder to clarify they're not following the bid requirements.
Okay, Brian Noggle,
Yes.
Scott Bieber, Dick Bonner, Norma Cusick,
No,
Ted Lyons, Linda Rosenfeld,
No,
Jeff Morgan,
Yes.
Amir Famili.
Yes.
Okay, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 yes votes, 3 no votes.
Okay, so we'll table it and then we'll just, with full information, be able to make a decision next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, all right, moving on. All right, we have under wastewater, we have KISS system modeling, capacity problem definition is discussion topic.
All right, we have, well, Phil, do you want to tee it up and I'll get the presentation up on the screen?
Yeah, sure. We're Jim with us today to give you an update on where we stand with 537. This will be a follow-up to the August 8th presentation that Jim provided. And just as a reminder, the way the timing is working out, all the municipalities are seeing this a few days before you're seeing it. So the KISS meetings are every first Thursday of the month. So the KISS signatories saw this 4 or 5 days ago. And it's going to be almost the same thing that was presented to them last Thursday. Jim, you want to take it away?
I will. Thank you. You'll recall the 2 meetings ago when I presented, we talked about the model that was developed. And at the last meeting, we talked about the rainfall analysis that we did and its impact on the system. And I told you at that point in time, we were going to run the 6 storms that we had identified in the model. These are historic storms from the last 22 years. And gauge what kind of impact they have. And that effectively sets the problem definition for where we stood in 2021 now. And then when we add the future changes, the future flows that we're going to add, where we're going to be at the end of our planning horizon, which right now is really looked at in 2 different increments, 2035 and 2050, with 2050 being the real mark that we're looking at. So I want to talk with you about what those results look like, share with you some of the discussions that we've been having with the other 15 signatories. Aren't we one of them?
15 municipalities, 2 authorities.
There you go. With all the other folks, and talk to you about our plan to go forward, right? Things are starting to move fast now, so we're going to be coming to talk with you guys to keep you involved in this. Next slide, please. So our agenda, and this is pretty close to what we went over with the signatories. The only difference here is I I took a tangent or a sidebar here to talk to them about how to find I&I. I'm not gonna bother you guys with that since we've already done most of that. So I want to go through our surrogate storms, talk to you about why we picked Hurricane Ida, show you what the problems are, this blossoms diagram that we're talking about, and the tables that go with it. It's important at this point that we define what the objectives are of this 537 plan, and that we get our heads wrapped around the fact that this 537 is effectively a master plan for all aspects of the system. We talk about the water master plan and the Klein's Island master plan. This is really all things wastewater. Go over how we're modeling the I&I reductions piece of it, and then talk about the next steps. We hope to knock that out in about 20 minutes. Please interrupt me with any questions, though. So, here you go. This is about 500 man-hours worth of work in one table, right? It's been used in engineering. So, the storms that we had looked at sugared off to these 6 storm events, and you'll recognize the names on the left side of most of them, up on the left side, because those were tropical storms or hurricanes. Our original plan was to come up with a 3-year, a 5-year, a 10-year, and a 20-year as surrogates, right? In the end, it's going to be the actual rainfall that we got since 2000 run through the model to see how our solutions do. But to cut the costs and the time, we're picking surrogates for each of the different levels of protection. These basically mean we're going to do the engineering to make sure that the system, when it's completed, can handle this type of storm event. While we're not a storm system, we do take water from rain into our system, and so we think of it as our level of protection. We weren't able to find a 20-year storm event. You'll recollect that I showed you all the statistics on the storms the last time, and Isaias is a good 10-year storm. The other storms that we had in the 20-plus year record period were greater than 20 years. So we don't have a good 20-year surrogate. But we had 3 good 5-year potential candidates and 2 good 3-year candidates that we went through. And rather than pick one, we modeled all 6. And you can see in the purple the key numbers, right? This is driving what would happen if we took everything to Klein's Island, what those peak flows. And I'll remind all of you that the current capacity at Klein's Island is 83 million gallons a day, right? So you can see where these numbers were for Ida. Ida is particularly attractive because it happened last year. We were all around when it happens, and it should be fresh in our minds. So it makes for a great surrogate for the engineering work that we're doing, because everybody knows just what it looked like. In the end, when you take what hit Klein's Island plus what didn't hit Klein's Island during that storm event, it's 166 million gallons. And when you go back to that peach column 2 to the left, you'll see that there were 47 approximate locations. Now, I did a great job of telling you how wonderful this model is that we built for you, but I do want to remind everybody that it's just a model, right? If it says it's coming out in one place, it's probably coming out in several places. So that 47 might be 40, it might be 80, but it gives you a pretty good idea, apples to apples. The other number that's really interesting is all the way on the left for the 2021 total volumes. 21 million gallons of wastewater made it out of the system and never made it to Klein's Island last September, a year ago. So this gives you an idea of our problem definition. Now, we went through with the program committee, program steering committee, and the KISS community. And in the end, we've elected to use IDA as our surrogate stand-in. It's important that you guys understand that in the end, like I said, we're going to run all of these storms through the model to see how our compliance is once we've gotten into a solution. But from an engineering standpoint, I've got to make certain assumptions to shorten the path. Otherwise, we're not going to get this done for another decade. So that's our storm of interest. Next slide, please. Before I get off of that, any questions about those numbers?
Well, my question is, are we picking Ida because it's the most recent storm, because there's already been some I&I work done in the municipalities and we have a tighter system?
No, not for those reasons. The main reason is because all the engineers and signatories remember what it was like. So going back to Ivan was a while ago. It also, both Ivan and Ivan and Violet had nuances to them that were a little bit different. And Ida just seemed to be a more normal type of storm event. There wasn't some extenuating circumstance that made it a little different. Just seemed dead normal for what we were having, and that's why we picked it.
Yeah, it's just my concern is if we're not using the worst storm, the highest rainfall storm, does that mean in the end our model will underestimate?
No, no,
what
trying
sizing we have to
to think of, we're gonna do so we've got dozens of alternative solutions to put together and to cost out. We only want to do that against one storm as we figure out, well, how big does this pump need to be? How big does that pipe need to be? To get about a 5-year level of protection. Basically what we're saying here is we're going to design our system so that it overflows. We recognize that it's going to overflow about every 5th year. We will know how we do on performance against an IZA. Apologize for mangling the name, but that'll give you a 10-year. Similarly, it'll, in the end, we want to know that all the 3-year events, and if you remember, in the 21-year record period, we had like 18 3-year events. We want to make sure that all of those types of events manage to pass through the system. And we'll do that with an extended model simulation. But it takes about 3 days to do an extended model simulation. We'll never finish the engineering in time if we do that. So this is just a stand-in until we get it narrowed down. Once we get it down to the last 2 or 3, we'll do all of these storms at the same time and check it. So just to follow up on that, so DEP obviously has a guidance manual for designing sewer systems, things like that. We shooting ourselves in the foot here by using all tropical and hurricanes? Is there any other guidance out there from them? Will they not accept anything less? How do we come down to using kind of a worst case scenario? So it's really not a worst case scenario. If you remember, there were quite a few other storms. So in the 5-year recurrence bandwidth, we think we had like 8 5-year storms in the last 20 years. So these were just the ones we've picked as our surrogates. In the end, the state's going to regulate us on how often the system overflows, regardless of what our design basis is. Their rules are 0 overflows. The engineers know that that's never possible. You're always going to get an event that you can't handle. So you have a design basis that drives your cost basis. In the end, if we commit to a 5-year level of protection and we're having overflows every 2 years, we're going to get called back to the principal's office, right? So part of our evaluation is a sensitivity evaluation, and then part of your job as the board is to say, engineers, are you sure you're being conservative enough when we pick our final solutions? So once we start to roll, it's hard to do that as a board until I tell you the benefit with the costs, right? And so we're 6 months away from having the first set of costs that go with these. That'll be the interesting conversation.
Yeah, I'm asking the opposite question. Are we being too conservative? So
well, that's another good, again, same, it works both directions. That's exactly right. Yeah, because at the end, it's a business decision. It's all business case. Next slide. This just gives you an idea of what the volumes were coming out. I know the manhole numbers probably don't mean anything to any of you, but X8, as an example, is right at the top end of Martin Luther King, about a 1/4 mile upstream of where the hump bridge comes over onto MLK. That's where the Cedar Creek lines all come together. These are, let's click on to the next slide. Keep going. These are where they occur. It's hard for me to do this from here. Get you guys oriented. If you're looking at the screen, the left-hand side is Upper Macungie, where those 2 Ys come together. That's where the pretreatment plant is. If you go down a little bit, you see that red line. That's just below Hamilton. That's by the 760 Tavern. That's the one we had all the problems with in 2018. Line going out to the left is Briningsville. That line all the way at the bottom with the 3 or 4 is Albertus Macungie. You can see that sort of one line that comes up out of there, the Spring Creek. You see the horseshoes, right? That's through the lower portion of the western Lehigh. And then where it all comes together right there, that's Keck's Bridge. That's our meter station 5 and 5A. From there, you've got the parallel
original Allentown Emmaus interceptor and our little Lehigh relief interceptor that goes up to Park Pump Station right there. It makes that last turn, goes up to MLK by the Hump Bridge. You've got the little Lehigh interceptor coming in to the two big red dots right at the end, which is Client's Island. Below that is Trout Creek and Trout Creek Relief. That line out on the right is coming down through Salisbury. And all the way at the top, the two little orange dots at the top, that's the Jordan Creek line coming down out of Copley Whitehall. So these are the overflows and these blossoms. We call this a blossom diagram. This is for Ida. We did this for all of the storms that you saw in that previous one. Rather than bore you with the 75 slides, I'm going to show you just two. You'll notice that the blossoms have different colors and sizes. The bigger the blossom, the more that comes out. And you can see that that purple hexagon is between 3 and 15 million gallons. If you go back to the previous slide, you would have seen it's about 3.5 million gallons coming out of that location.
What is that? Yeah, where is that?
Say again?
Where is that location, the worst?
That's just what I said. That's at the head of MLK.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so you know where St. Elmo Street is? Right there. And it's where Allentown system comes in, the Salisbury relief line comes in just downstream. You got Salisbury's flows coming in through there. And they're all, that's not really the choke point, quite frankly. The choke point is at the Hump Bridge. Actually, the choke point is between Park Pump Station and the water plant, where the siphons go behind the water plant and cause it back up through there. So that's the thing about these blossoms as well, is you might look at that and go, wow, we've got a real problem with I&I down in that neighborhood. But in reality, Lisa, if you'll trace your cursor all the way back up the Cedar Creek line, coming all the way through the park, up into the golf course, see that red dot? That's in the middle of Allentown's golf course. And that problem isn't caused by Allentown's golf course, although some of it is. The problem's caused by the peak flows coming out of South Whitehall Township. So that's a good 6 miles upstream, right? So it's just like everybody getting out of their driveway. The traffic jam is on the extension south down at Quakertown, right? But it's everybody going south that causes it. So it's important to keep that in the back of your mind.
And Jim, I know you stress this a lot. This isn't obviously the Bible, and it's under predicting up near the pretreatment plant, right? Because of the crazy fluctuations.
Yeah. I went through that with you guys in the past. You know, it's Paul Calamita, who's our outside counsel on some of these water issues, has a saying that I've adopted. All models are wrong, some are useful. This is a very useful model, but it is by no means the type of model that's spot on. I just watched my cousin Vinny when they had that argument about the torque wrench closing the water. It's not that level of accuracy. It's a half a pound torque, but it's really good for where are the problems, and generally what do we have to do to get them to go away. Now, this is 2021. Between now and 2050, we're projected to add another 7.5 million gallons of flow. Now, that's not our partners only. We're about 4 of that, 3.5 of that. The rest of it is Allentown and all the other signatories and authorities. If you don't change the pipes, this is what that looks like. And Lisa, if you go back to my table, please, a couple slides before. One more. So the 166 now becomes 202. So we're only adding 7.5 million gallons of flow, but you've got 30, I can't do math, 30 something, 38, something like that, 36 things. Somebody that can do math. Because you're trying to squeeze it through pipes that haven't been upsized, right? So our job is to eliminate that. You'll also notice that the 47, not yet, the 47 goes to 79, and the 21 goes to 38, right? So it's because the system's small, right? We've been saying for quite some time now that our system's small, and where everybody's trying to come through the city system, that's too small. Okay, Lisa.
Jim, can I ask a question on that? So are those projections based on new development, redevelopment base flow plus additional I&I, or is that
Yeah.
so that's just assuming the pipes get worse because nothing happens?
That's a smart question.
It's a combination.
So the modeling that we did, so the 2021 was 2021. In 2050, the program team has looked at things and said, how do we want to treat the system, all things being equal? So first was 7.5 million gallons. Those were projections that were done by each of the individual towns' planning commissions. And we've asked them, Phil was getting ready to quit over this because we asked them so many times, are you sure these are the right numbers? Are you sure you're not being too conservative? In the end, this is the numbers that they went with. So that's the first piece. The second piece, as we've said, left unaddressed, the systems will continue to leak a little bit more each year. So we've assumed 0.5% of creep on the leakage that's there, relatively small, but it's about 16% over a 30-year planning horizon for just the I&I, not the wastewater component, but the leakage that's coming in component. And that's pretty reasonable. We've also seen that while we have added significant users in the last 15 or 20 years, our wastewater levels have been pretty level, and actually our gallons per day that we're selling are dropping. And we put two and two together and realized everybody's gone to Home Depot and Lowe's and buying new refrigerators, new washing machines and things like that. So we've also accounted for that for the next 10 years. We figure that within 10 years, that turnover will be done. So we've got a 0.2% per year in wastewater, foul flow reduction each year, so a little bit. So that's what's included in this. 0.5 up, 0.2 down for the first 10 years, and the new flow. The majority of the impact you see here is strictly related to the new flow. It's the exact same storm, just 30 years later. Next slide, please. So that slide and that table are effectively the problem definition, right? All the engineers in the room know you can't solve anything unless you've defined what your problem is. Those blossoms, in eliminating them, is the entire purpose of the 537 master plan that we're putting together, right? So that's our first goal. That's the regulatory goal, right? That's what they want to see, is those blossoms gone. Our other goals are to sequence that work so we only build what's needed when it's needed. So if the signatories are over projecting how quickly you're going to develop, let's not build it 30 years in advance. Let's wait where we can for flow triggered planning. So we're going to build the modular stuff when it's necessary. The non-modular stuff, that's a pipe, that's a wet well, that's something you only want to build once. We're going to build that to the 2050 standard. So if we say this pipe needs a parallel, we're going to assume we're only building it once, and we're going to build it to the full build-out standard. We want to pick the most advantageous life cycle solution. We want to recognize the long-term rehab needs for the pipes and the pumps and the force mains. We don't want to build a plan that assumes, for example, that Allentown's Little Lehigh interceptor that was built in the 20s, 20s is still going to be useful in 2050 without somebody going and looking under the hood, right? We want to do that with all the critical big pipe assets that are out there. And then finally, and this is really more of a city goal, we want to minimize how many independent pipes people are trying to construct down the middle of MLK to get to Klein's Island when we realize the Little Lehigh interceptor is not big enough. In other words, let's not build 6 pipes, 6 different signatories. Let's be sensible about it and build a regional solution. So those are our primary plan objectives. I want to stop here because this is really the governance behind what we're going to do for the next 15 years, right? Achieving these goals. Does anybody have any questions about these goals, or as the directors want to opine that something's missing or misstated?
I just have a quick question. Could you tell us what percentage of stormwater actually goes into our wastewater system?
Zero stormwater. So nothing stormwater until it actually hits a storm sewer. And none of the storm sewers are connected to our sewer systems. What is going into ours is rainwater and groundwater that never hit the sewer. So it's percolating rainwater, it's rising groundwater, and most significantly, as I showed you when we went through the RDII analyses a couple of meetings ago, and I showed you the horns that we see when it comes up, that's the inflow that's pouring in through the tops primarily of manholes and clip cleanouts. That percentage of the flow is somewhere in the neighborhood of 3 to 23 times the normal baseline flow, depending on which portion of the system you're in. Our system coming through Keck's Bridge is typically in the neighborhood of 3 to 4x. There are other signatories that are well into the double digits in terms of how much the flow is higher than their normal dry weather flow.
What do you mean by number 6? Can you just clarify that?
Yeah, so Phil has a saying, we all stop short of the Klein's Island. So everybody's pipeline stops short of Klein's Island. Only city pipes go into Klein's Island. Even our park pump station stops short by about 1/3 of a mile away. It tries to pound it through the same small pipe. When you go back to the figure where I showed everything coming together at the hump bridge, you've got a 30, a 36, and a 27 all coming together trying to get to a single 30, which then goes down to a 16, a 20, and a 24-inch siphon behind the water treatment plant, right? So we're trying to all drink from the same cocktail straw, effectively. It's too small. Because all of the individual pipes stop short and go into the city's 30-inch pipe. And the city doesn't want to be in a position of saying to South Whitehall, you need to extend your Cedar Creek interceptor all the way to Klein's Island instead of stopping short at St. Elmo's. And to go to Copley Whitehall and say, we want you to extend your Little Lehigh and your Jordan Creek all the way to Klein's Island. And go to Salisbury and say, we want you to extend your Trout Creek relief line all the way. And to come to us and say, we want you to build a new interceptor down the middle of MLK. They'd rather see one or fewer solutions that are limited by how often they got to rip their roads up or rip their parks up. Because it's all got to go through their yards to get to Klein's Island.
You have one of your number one goal to eliminate all the blossoms through 2035. But also you have number 4 at the cost advantage, right? How about if you go through your model and you find out to get to your number 1, number 4 would not be achievable?
Well, we're going to identify at least a handful of things that will achieve number 1. They're going to cost different amounts. So let's say we end up with 5 solutions. They're all technically viable. One's 100 million, one's 200, 300, 400, 500. I think we're, especially based on the conversation we had about the water pipes, we're going to want to end up to this one down here. So that's the most advantageous life cycle cost solution. And I say life cycle specifically because you can do shorter, like if you're only looking at capital costs, it might be cheaper to pump. And once you start figuring out energy and carbon, it's not. So look at the life cycle cost, pick the cheapest one. What's not included in that line item, it probably needs to be, in fact, the city's lobbying for this is, it's also fiscally responsible, can be achieved, right? And the challenge with a statement like that is that your ideas as the board may be different than the borough's ideas, which will be different than the regulators' ideas. Right now, the regulators look at it and say, as long as you're below 2% of the median household income, I don't want to hear anything about affordability. That's a
Say that again?
2% of the median household income has been a traditional number that they've used. It comes out of their CSO program, which we're not, their combined sewer program, but they apply those numbers liberally for any sort of discussions of poor mouth, right? As they
So if that's median household income, let's say, to make the numbers easy, $100,000, it'd be $2,000
a year.
Your bill, your sewer bill.
Each individual bill, yeah.
Is that before or after taxes? It's a big difference.
I don't know. It's not very often that we come across that, and it's not likely that we will here. Especially when you know, the first piece of this will be, well, how much of this are you building for the new guys? And are they paying for that? You know, all those things get in there. These are broad brush, right? This is, you know, we can get into some real nuance of these goals, but it's important as the board of directors that you guys start to think about these from your perspective of your responsibilities. What is it that you want LCA to be in a position to do? And make sure that that's influencing what the broader KISS community is doing as we go through this. And it goes in both directions, less conservative, more conservative. I think that's where you guys need to be weighing in. We can engineer anything. We can tell you what the cost is going to be for that. But you guys need to be thinking of it from a customer standpoint and from an environmental steward, telling you your jobs, an environmental stewardship standpoint. Next slide, and get off that soapbox. Okay, so in broad brush, there's really only a handful of knobs to turn here. So we can reduce, right? You saw how much of that leakage is. So we can reduce, we can pipe it by gravity, we can pipe it by pumping it, or we can store it someplace until the peak of the flow goes. Now, storage in our system becomes a little problematic. While storage is cheap, it's really the cheapest of all of these. In fact, unintentionally, those are numbered from most expensive to least expensive. But storage only works if you can empty the tank afterwards, right? One of the things we've proven is that as we go forward, our pipes are never going to empty unless we make them bigger. We've already reduced out of our system significant. I showed you at the session on the RDII how much our partners have done a great job of reducing. They still got 3 years of reduction left, but they've made tremendous strides. So we're really faced it primarily with pumping and piping. The other signatories, they still have all 4 of those. Many of them have done no reduction, so they've got a lot more leeway there. One way or the other, what you don't take out and what you don't store is going to end up at Klein's Island. There's only 2 things you can do with it there. You can treat it, which means instead of being able to treat 83, we're going to have to treat 203, right? Given the current numbers that we have, no other reductions taking place. Or build some big storage tanks, or some combination of 2. Because once you get to the plant, there's not much more. So those are our levers. And as we work through the alternatives, they're really just variations of these different themes for solving the problem. Any questions about those big levers?
Yeah, are you only considering storage down in Klein's Island, or are you also going to consider storage?
So the blue storage is upstream, the green storage is Klein's Island. I hope that's blue and green to you guys, because it's not always the same to me. Yeah, so for example, I thrown South Whitehall under the bus earlier, with the flows coming down into the Allentown Golf Course. Their solution might not be to eliminate, their solution might be to put a storage tank up there somewhere, like we did with our FEB, right? That's our FEB was a huge, really great engineering decision, put that there. It made a gigantic impact on our overflow performance. So that's a really viable solution, as long as the pipes can drain it out afterwards. Next slide. So remember that the communities that you guys serve have been doing this now since 2010. Their engineering teams are very knowledgeable. They've spent a lot of money and effort in figuring out where their leaks come from. Others, the other signatories are further back on that. And so taking that slide with the blossom diagrams and giving everybody a sense of what would happen if we did some common sense I&I reductions. Like, remember the horns? What happens if we shave those horns down? Those types of things, those areas that were pink, well, why don't we go and do some source reduction work in those areas? Kind of common sense, what makes sense types of things. So we are modeling that to sort of provide everybody with a, if you did this, this is what it would do to that 166 and 202 number. Next slide, please. And so we're doing that by going right back to the source materials. We're pulling through the analyses that we showed you guys before. Next slide. We're looking at the hydrographs, specifically hurricane-itis. That's one of the beautiful things about picking that as our surrogate is I've got real hard data. I know exactly what came through those. Next slide. And then you might be aware that a number of the communities also did, after our metering, nighttime wearing work. That was about a third of Allentown. All of our signatories, including the collection systems that LCA operates, and about a quarter of Copley Whitehall's. So we've got all this information. Put it all in the bowl together, mix it together, look at what's leaking, and come up with just, you know what, it's red. Why, they colored it red for a reason. Figure that rehab's going to get done. Put all that together. Next slide. Put that into a model. And based on the different types of actions that they take for I&I work, drop that into the model and see what those numbers come out to be. So we're going to have that in about a month. Right? That'll probably be our October presentation, you guys, for what this is. This table is the actual table that's been handed to all the signatories to say, in the model, these are the reductions in I&I you're going to get based on the techniques you pick. They've all got to go find the sewers that are leaking, and they've got to define what are the I&I techniques, sewer rehab techniques they're going to actually use. They're going to tell us. We can't dictate that. They'll tell us. And that'll be, so you'll have, in the end, we're going to have 3 different source reductions. Do nothing. Leave it alone. That's the 166 and the 202. We got the common sense. That's the stuff Arcadis is coming up with. And then we've got what each of the 16 individual signatories are going to say, yeah, that's all great. Here's what we're going to do. And we'll model that as well. So we'll have 3 different scenarios to see what that looks like. That'll be one of the first things we do as part of the next stage of work, the preliminary screening of alternatives. Next slide. Next steps.
And then, Jim, I just want to reiterate, DP has said twice now in the past 2 months that they are expecting a strong I&I program. So that's the expectation. All the signatories have heard it. Whether they deliver on a plan is a different story, but Jim and I are working on that, trying to reach out to everyone individually, to try to walk them through it again. But DP is expecting every single municipality to have a strong I&I program.
We've gone through 5 different leadership changes at DEP since we started with the SCART program back in 2009. And that message has been consistent all the way through. So as I said, late September, early October, we'll have these revised blossoms. That's not the revised one. That'll show if we do these common sense reductions, this is where this will happen. We're also going to model for the first time the trunk line and interceptors, making them bigger, putting a parallel one next to them to see if we carry all that through, what's that mean to that peak 15-minute, 1 hour at Klein's Island? So those numbers will be coming through, and that'll really help inform Kleinfelder and AECOM's work at the plant. So that'll come up. You guys should see this October, November board presentation. Next slide. As we've said before, what's not removed has to be conveyed. Go ahead and hit this area is really where everything comes together. This is all where all Allentown's interceptors come together. That's where all the problems are. Next slide.
Quick question.
Please.
You mentioned there's this, going by the water plant, there's a siphon in the sewage line. What is that?
So I'm not positive, but near as I can tell, we pull water out of the Little Lehigh to drink, right? And there's a pipe there. That pipe was probably there before the sewer got built.
Okay.
And so when they built the sewer and it came in, it was going to run right through that pipe. So they did a zag underneath of it.
Oh, literally put a trap through it.
And instead of putting the 30-inch underneath, what they did, so we have 30-inch concrete, and they put in a 16, 20, and a 24-inch cast iron. I can't imagine what the inside of this thing looks like. But it goes down and underneath that pipe, and then comes back up and heads toward Fountain Park. And what we've clearly seen is that that's an impediment. Hydraulically, new, it shouldn't be, but hydraulically now with cast iron running sewage through it for 80 years, 100 years.
We're talking 1930s.
Yeah, there's clearly, and we've seen that in a bunch of different real-time trials that we've done, little stress tests, and you can see it just backs right up through there. Right, so that's one of the big pinch points.
Thank you, I was curious about that.
Yeah, that's what that is. So, these aren't the only ones, or we've got a number of these within our own Western Lehigh interceptor system, but this one is the stop short. All those lines coming in, all the signatories coming into the city's original 1920s to 1940s vintage pipelines. Next slide. So what we've asked all of the signatories that have those pipes, give us some ideas about how you want us to plan on using them. Do you want us to pressurize your interceptor in order to pass more through? Many of these pipes aren't designed for that. But we're asking, you own the system, Salisbury, how do you want us to run it? We've also implemented our own pump station operating rules to optimize what's coming out of that. But we do have 3 other major pump stations, Copley Whitehall's Eberhard and Upper Macungee's Rabbinold and Applewood pump stations. So we're getting their operating rules. We've also got places where their interceptor can be surcharged and it would seem fine, except my house is 200 feet off of the interceptor, connected by a pipe that goes up through my basement, and I'd really prefer you not to store the peak of the flow in my basement. So we've asked everybody to do the same thing that Upper Mac, Lower Mac, Albertus, and Macungie did, which is identify where they've got owners that are connected low, so we're not allowing the pipe to go that big. Also ask them about, if we've got to replace your line, do you want a new second line, which is our preferred option from an operations standpoint, or no, do you want just one pipe? Again, personal decision, 2 cars or 1 car. And then to the city specifically, what's an acceptable use of your interceptor, since all of us come through those pipes? And that's work that actually we started last month. We keep asking the signatories for this back. A lot of them look at us in bafflement when we ask the question, because they've never been asked the question before, but we're trying to work that through so that our solution doesn't create a problem by filling people's basements up, or doesn't pressurize a sewer that's not meant for it, and that sewer ends up collapsing because we've pressurized it. Next slide. Next slide. So you're going to get a proposal from us any week now for the next phase of this. So the capacity problem definition is largely done, and we're moving into the first of 3 different steps through the alternatives process for picking what we're going to build. The first one we call PSOA, preliminary screening of alternatives. There are literally thousands of permutations that we could put into play here. Rather than doing that, we've tried to identify how do we bracket some things. So we've identified the 3 source reduction pieces that I've talked about. We've also looked at 3 different treatment scenarios. 1, which is what we're doing now, everybody goes to Klein's Island, and 2 that are around utilizing our pre-treatment plant to help ease some of the load on Klein's Island, as well as some of the gravity load that's coming through our pipes and the city's pipes. And then from conveyance, we're going to start with three of the many alternatives. 1 is just pure gravity, Klein's Island, no new pump stations. The other is going back to where we were during the SCARP, which is building what we call the little sister pump station, which is really the Park pump station's twin, sending all that flow from the Little Lehigh and the Allentown into Klein's Island. And the third one is to mirror Spring Creek pump station. So our operations department has told us, under no circumstances, put it near Spring Creek. They don't want it in the floodplain. Right now, I'm thinking I like Cricks Lane a little bit, but putting it someplace in that general arrangement of somewhere between Ancient Oaks and where the Albertus, Macungie, and Upper Milford lines comes in to relieve the flow through our horseshoes is a conveyance option, and seeing what those do. Those 27 alternatives will be designed not designed, that's the wrong term, modeled, right? We'll go through, we'll identify all the specifics around how to do that and eliminate the blossoms, or mostly eliminate the blossoms for all 27 of those. And come up with a price tag. Not a spot-on accurate price tag, not when you're gonna complain, is it $200,000 off price tag? But one that's, you know, I don't know, plus or minus $50 million. Right? That's 50 million amongst friends. To give us an idea, so it'll be accurate relative to the 27. And that will inform the next step, which is, next slide, please, which is the final alternatives analysis. And from there, we'll be really honing in on the ones that seem to be most useful. The ideal is that we take the 27 and we're down to 6 or 8. I suspect that each of the signatories is going to have their own favorites. So I can see us modeling another 27 through the FAA process. At this point, though, we're going to be looking at things like carbon footprint, full O&M costs, net present worth, and we're going to start looking at the design storm sensitivity. You guys were asking about those other storms. We'll be able to see what that does. At that point, we'll also be coming back to you and the other signatories to say, how do you feel about climate change? Are you confident that this 5-year event is going to still be a 5-year event? What level of safety do you want to put on that? And then we'll start by saying, well, if you build this, here's how you put the pieces together, and here's what the timeline is for getting it done by 2035, which is when all of this needs to be completed by 2035. That work right now is slated to be April through February. You can imagine at this point, this is where the rubber really starts to meet the road with the signatories. We're really seeing the dollar amounts at that point. And we move to the final stage, which is the selection of solution. Coming out of that FAA, I'm hoping that we have between 1 and 3 favorites. And from that, we do a full 24-year simulation. So we'll know truly how each one does with all the different storms. We'll have a detailed project sequence and schedule. And from there, be able to start to put together a payout. When are you spending this $250 million? Right? And that you guys need to start thinking about it in terms of those dollar amounts, right? This is not a $10 million or $50 million program. These are, right? You can't count how many zeros that is, but it's those zeros. This is where Ed and his team really start to get involved with, where am I coming up with this cash? This is where Lisa starts to get involved in a big way of, what does this mean to rates? And it's not just rates for us, it's all those other signatories as well. And then trying to come to some agreement for how regionally it's going to get paid for. Is it going to be based on current allocation, future allocation? Are we going to look at dry weather versus wet weather flows and who's contributing what? And suss through that. The goal is to have this done ideally by June of 2025. That was our original plan. We're a year and a half in. We're about 3 months behind. We're actually not behind. Let's step that back. We're actually ahead of schedule for where we were on our original plan. But what we've started to say is the back end of this, the institutional side of this, is going to take longer. So we've already added an extra 3 months. We've already started talking to the state about, might not be early 2025, it might be later 2025, and they haven't pushed back too hard on us. So that's where we're headed for it, right? A lot of decisions to be made, and certainly plenty of places for you guys to give input on policy, finance, and how the implementation takes place.
I just want to add something, Jim. We have to plan through 2050, but DEP is going to hold us to what we say we're going to construct by 2035. So there's going to be a schedule. It's called an implementation schedule. It's the last section of 537. So this plan, if it's not in that implementation schedule, it's not going to be built. So that implementation schedule is going to drive everything.
And if it is in there, damn well better be built. You know, we're gonna have a window of grace between now and 2035 for overflows, because they know that we're gonna be building stuff. They're gonna judge us based on, are we doing what we said we're gonna do? which means are we building the projects? They won't judge us on the actual system performance until it's all built. So it'll be 2035 before they start judging us on overflow history. We anticipate that in 2035, we'll also be back through another planning process as well.
But how about you? You're gonna be with us for how long? You're gonna be with us to 2025.
Can you model that?
Thanks. Yeah, absolutely. 2035?
How about, you talked about flooding basements. I know the liability of the different aspects of the plan. Do we do an assessment of risk with this path versus that path?
Basements specifically?
No, just for anything that could be causing us problems from a liability standpoint.
Yeah, so every solution is going to have its pros and its cons, its strengths and its weaknesses. Well, specifically to basements, when we did the original work on the old model, Keystone had gone through for Lower Mac primarily and identified 70 plus manholes that had special hydraulic grade lines. You've got to keep it down, otherwise it's going to hit Joey's basement. As we go through, we're trying to eliminate that, but there's also a certain point where you look at it and go, holy cow, I'm up to a 78-inch pipe. Why don't we put a grinder pump there or a backflow preventer? So we're going to look at getting rid of, trying to get close to it, but where we've got those little pieces, we're going to be smart about it and put them in there. From a sensitivity standpoint and what those might be, those are the types of questions that the users have to ask, right? So Lower Macungie and Lower Macungie's engineer know their system better than any of us. So they're the ones that are going to have to look at this and go, I'm a little uncomfortable about what you've got planned coming behind Ancient Oaks, right, as an example, or wherever it might be. And that's why we spend so much time collaborating with all these engineers. This would be much simpler if it was just the three of us trying to figure it out, right? But there's 16 different communities. It gives you a different number every time. That we've got to work with to get all this done. The good side is they've got tons of knowledge to bring. We're just trying to work that into the analysis.
Okay, thank you. I think we spent a lot of.
Moving parts, huh?
It's going to get even more.
Stay tuned. Appreciate the updates all the time.
Thanks for the update.
All right, let's move on to the agenda to item number 6, the monthly project updates, information items. In our board package, white pages, digital 25 to 32. Andrew?
Great. Okay, I'll just hit a couple hot topics for the next meeting. As you can see from this report, there's a lot on the agenda for September. So our next meeting, which is Monday again already, we have planned a more detailed review of the proposed budget, the preliminary budget. Ed and his crew will be working on that between now and Monday. The August monthly financial report, because our second September meeting is earlier this month, we'll probably just submit that to you electronically and potentially not have it for you on the 19th. We'll just send it to you by the end of the month. Also wanted to note that for the next meeting on Monday, we have some project reviews we'll do. The water filtration plant system master plan is a presentation, so no approval needed. We're just going to hear from the consultants about how that master plan turned out and any key points related to that. And then one item of note is that the KISS system modeling preliminary screening of alternatives that Jim just talked to us about, we were planning to come to you next week for approval, but just having a little bit of a delay in getting all the final details together for that. So that's going to come off the agenda for the next meeting, and you'll see that in October. Is that right, Phil?
Yes, we're planning to ask for board authorization on October 10th for the PSO.
Okay, great. And then that's just a little bit of some of the highlights for the next meeting. I also wanted to highlight on the project updates. This is maybe a little bit of a broken record as we went through this last year as well, but the financial audit is delayed again this year due to waiting on the Pennsylvania Municipal Retirement System financial audit. So Ed is taking care of the appropriate notifications that need to be made, but we'll certainly, our statements are completed and ready. We just need to receive that PMRS audit information before we can finalize and present to you. Is any other questions or comments on the rest of the report?
Thank you, Liesl. Sorry to Andrew for making him jump. Okay, moving on, staff comments.
I have nothing additional for today.
Visitor comments?
No comments, thank you.
Any public comments on any items?
Here's the top search result.
Ooh, sorry about that. Interesting.
I have no comments, Brian.
My phone did. All right, thanks, Brian. Okay, we did add to the agenda an opportunity for the board members to make any comments on items that were not covered during the meeting. Does anybody from the board have any additional comments or concerns, statements? Had enough, huh? All right, at this time, we are going to adjourn our meeting, and it is 20 minutes before 3. We'll reconvene in an executive session. We do not expect to make any decisions at that time, just review a number of items, one of which was legal matters, another one was real estate. So those will be the topics of the discussion in 20 minutes before 3.
Will dinner be served?
Leftover lunch.
Leftover lunch. Okay. All right, thank you, everybody.
What time? What
20
time?
20 of 3.
10 minutes.
10 minutes? Okay.
Brian, do you understand?
Thanks.